To have natural hair. So I think that this is an opportunity to have a conversation. But before we get started, I want to make sure that Cheryl can introduce one of our esteemed guests so that she can also be part of this conversation.
First and foremost, I want to say thank y'all. I went to Skye with this crazy idea last year, and she's like, okay, let's figure it out. So thank you guys for coming. All right. So tonight we have Kristin Rowe, an associate professor of American Studies at California State University Fullerton. She is a former fellow for the Career Enhancement Fellowship offered by the Institute for Citizens and Scholars, funded by the Mellon Foundation. Her work has been featured in multiple academic journals, including the Journal of American Culture, Women and Language, Contemporary Ethnography, and Open Cultural Studies. Dr. Rowe has been quoted in publications including The Washington Post, and she is featured in the three-part docuseries, The Black Beauty Effect, now streaming on Netflix. Y'all have some homework this weekend. Go watch. Tonight's discussion also will be led by Dr. Skye Patrick. Now, any of y'all who've ever dealt with me before, you know I'm very conversational, so we're going to talk.
Well, we're going to start by doing, as is customary for LA County Library, the land acknowledgement. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tuktaviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash people. We honor and pay respects to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, reconciliation, and elevating the stories, culture, and communities of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, and in no particular order, the Fernandino Tuktaviam Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Councils, Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians, Quiche Nation, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and the San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. And then if we could all take a moment to give a warm welcome to Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell.
Let's rock and roll.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cheryl Kahn, the Black Resource Center librarian. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to the Please Don't Touch My Crown. Tonight's event is a special panel discussion between three phenomenal women exploring the question, is hair discrimination racial discrimination? Throughout American history, natural hair has been legislated by those who do not possess it. Sorry, not sorry. And this is basically to flex their power. In Louisiana, for example, headscarves had to be worn by women of African descent to signify their enslaved status, even if they were free. Even today, some school districts and places of employment have language within their policies that police the types of hairstyles that can be worn by students and employees. These examples and many more lay the foundation for the Crown Act. Our panel tonight is composed of Supervisor Holly Mitchell of Los Angeles County's 2nd District and Associate Professor of American Studies at California State Fullerton, Dr. Kristin Rowe. Holly J. Mitchell is a values-based policymaker who serves the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. Prior to being elected to the Board of Supervisors in 2020, she served in the California legislature for over a decade. During her tenure in the state Senate, she authored the Crown Act, creating a respectful and open workforce for natural hair. On July 3rd, 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom signed her bill into law, making California the first state in the nation to pass this groundbreaking anti-discrimination legislation. Yes. Since being elected to the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Mitchell has spearheaded numerous groundbreaking initiatives, including the creation of the Second District Racial Justice Learning Exchange to continue the work to help end discriminatory practices and systematic racism through community dialogue and shared learning. She also created the county's first safe RV parking lot to help address the homelessness crisis, launched the first countywide guaranteed income program that includes foster youth, established the first community budget program for unincorporated areas of LA County, and put forward a first of its kind program to protect small business owners from displacement. A third generation Angelino, Supervisor Mitchell is honored to represent the 2 million residents of Los Angeles's vibrant and diverse second district, which includes this neighborhood, along with 12 cities and dozens of unincorporated communities. All right, I introduced you to Dr. Rowe. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Skye Patrick. Skye was appointed to her role in 2016. She is responsible for the library's 86 libraries, 15 vehicle mobile fleet, and resources that are used by more than 3.4 million customers across LA County. From the beginning of her tenure, Skye's mission has been to break down barriers and expand access by developing programs that meet the needs of LA County's diverse communities. Under Skye's leadership, LA County Library received the 2023 National Medal for Museum and Library Service, the nation's highest honor given to museums and libraries. She is also a recipient of the 2025 James Irvine Leadership Award, which recognizes leaders whose innovative solutions to critical state challenges improve people's lives, create opportunity, and contribute to a better California. Patrick remains dedicated to reinforcing the library's role as a hub for information literacy, civic engagement, learning, and belonging. Skye, Supervisor Mitchell, and Dr. Rowe, thank you so much for being here tonight. Skye, I will turn it over to you.
Come over here so I can get a close-up of your hair to show my loctician. Come on. Come on, hair. It's stunning.
I see you blushing, Cheryl.
That's beautiful.
I was just gonna say, when I walked in, I saw Cheryl's elaborately beautiful
Gorgeous.
hair, and
It's
I have
gorgeous.
not had my hair done
Yeah, me
either.
either.
So,
Nor
you know,
color.
but this is part of what natural hair means. Sometimes the coif is coiffing, and sometimes it's not. And that, I think, is part of the conversation we're gonna have here tonight. So welcome Supervisor
Thank you very
Mitchell,
much.
and welcome Dr. Rowe. We're so happy that
Lovely
you're
to be
here. We're
with
so
you.
happy that all of you are here in this room, creating this space to talk about something very intimate. But also, I think this is an opportunity to open the conversation and open the community. I invite you into this conversation. So with that, we're going to make sure that there's some time that you can ask anyone on panel, particularly the supervisor, because she's our special guest, any questions you might have about her hair or about a specific policy. Let me stand corrected. You have to go to Tuesday if you want to ask about other policies. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the Crown Act, Supervisor Mitchell. And can you share with this esteemed audience the moment you realized that this legislation was necessary?
You all remember the young New Jersey wrestler?
Yes.
Remember that image of that woman attacking, not just cutting his hair, but if you watch the video, it was an attack. And I'm a parent, and I thought we have to sign permission slips to, like, you know, go from the one side of the playground to the other.
Right.
So how could someone be be physically attacking him that way? And I remember watching it over and over, and every time I'd see it, I'd have another aha moment. Like, where were his parents? Why was he put in the position to have to make that decision alone?
Right.
To decide to lock is a process. I've talked about being a parent. My son was locked for a period of time. He had a false start. You know, went to school with the two-strand twist. Came home that evening and said, we need to have a conversation. Okay. I've been locked not his whole life, but his memory of me. And, you know, while there were young men who were locked when he was in elementary school, I was clear that that was an individual decision. It's a decision you have to make yourself. And he had a false start and, you know, talked about the attention it drew and the questions. And I said, yeah, that's a part of the process. So if you aren't ready to handle that, then you aren't ready for your two-strand twist. But I think the moment I'm at a conference, History of the Crown Act, how it came to be. I'm at the conference of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. My own affinity group, Nobel Women, the National Organization of Black Elected Legislative Women, Black female state legislators across the country, had a breakfast the last day of the conference. And the senior VP from Dove, A.C. Eagleson Bracey, was doing a presentation, a speech, and talked about the survey they had conducted of Black women about our own attitudes about our own hair. And some of you may be old enough to remember that historic, the baby doll test, where the Black kids gravitated to the white dolls. Well, having conversations, family meeting, ourselves about our own hair could be very telling. And so the survey results were just made me sad about our own attitudes about our hair. And so what AC was asking was for a legislator to consider introducing a resolution to talk about this issue. When I looked at the survey results, that conference is in November. In December, typically in the state legislature, you are kind of putting the final touches on your legislation that you'll introduce in January. So I go back and tell my staff, call this lady, these survey results were horrible. I thought, why not a woman who's locked, who ran for office locked? So that's the only context in which my legislative colleagues knew me. Makes sense. And I said, I'm not introducing a resolution. As an elected official, I can legislate and appropriate. So we're going to write a law, not just be it resolved. I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's how it came to be. The moment I knew I was the right person at the right time, at the right place, was our first policy committee meeting in Judiciary Committee. And this bad sister attorney who had spent years doing legal research and litigating on behalf of natural hair was our witness. And a colleague of mine asked her to explain race-based traits. Because what the Crown Act does is it declares our hair a race-based trait and therefore can be protected under the law. Under EEOC law, you're protected against discrimination based on gender, age, sexual orientation, all those things. And we put race-based traits in that same body of law. And that's what the Crown Act does. That's why we have the protection. So he wanted to understand what other race-based traits were. And without hesitation, she read him like only a skilled, confident, frankly, Black woman can. I mean, it's our gift. And he caught me in the members' lounge later and said, Holly, I just don't understand, da, 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 da. And I said, well, he was relatively new to the Senate. In the state legislature, there are maybe 4,000 to 5,000 bills introduced a year. You can't be an expert on all of them. And if anybody tells you they are, they're not. And so I said, well, you're new to the Senate. What I have learned since I've been here, there are people that I know who do go deep in those policy issues. And there are people who watch me on all things women's health, children's health, child welfare services, criminal justice reform. I had my own body of policy areas of expertise. So you kind of looked at those people. I said, so since I am the only Black woman serving in the California State Senate, and I happen to have natural hair, how about on this one, you just trust me? Because for you to ask me questions about a Covatus, and you're maybe 35, I'm not sure the source of your information, and anybody in here under 40 didn't even know what a Covatus is. I said, the fact that you have time traveled to ask me about a Covatus suggests I'm not sure that you are really coming to this and to me with an authentic, real inquiry. So I'm going to take that for what it might be and just say, why don't you trust me? We say it passed unanimously. Actually, it didn't, because he abstained from all the votes. He abstained in judiciary. He abstained on the Senate floor. The beauty of that story is the day we were going for the bill signing. This is 2019. It was the first bill signing ceremony Governor Newsom did in his office. He'd been elected that year. And so there's a member's elevator. That's AC from Dove. Standing in the chair behind the governor, it was my loctician of 20 years, Gwen Staples, who has since passed. Yeah, Gwen. I flew her up so she could see it. So all those women you saw in that picture, I take them in the members elevator to go from my office on it's only been 5 years. What floor was I on? The 5th floor to the governor's office, the whole group. And the elevator stops on the 3rd floor, which is where the Senate floor is in the members lounge. And the elevator door opened and he was standing there. Oh. Holly. Hi, Senator. Well, where are you headed? To a bill signing. The bill you didn't support. And so they all knew of the story. And we looked at each other and fell out laughing. And I'm sure he heard an elevator full of women laughing from the 3rd floor all the way to the 1st floor. So that moment, of all the people, of all the times a day for the elevator to open, it's him alone.
Mm-hmm. That was a divine intervention. I'm a
Without
fan of
question.
it. Yeah. That story is so rich. I have so many questions, but I want to make sure I get Dr.
Please.
Rowe in here on this one, who is our resident expert in race studies, identity, and representation. How do you interpret the cultural significance of natural hair in today's climate? Now, I want to contextualize this because we are in California, Southern California, very progressive area. I grew up in other parts of the country where it was not progressive. And I now understand that Dr. Rowe and I have similar passings or intersections in the Middle West, where when I locked my hair, there was nobody. There wasn't a loctician. That title it didn't even come into fruition yet. So let's talk about it from this vantage point.
And thank you all so much again for having us here. I'm so honored to be here. There's so much I could say, right? This is such a huge question. But suffice to say, as we read a little bit of the history towards the beginning of the event, we know sort of for most of the 20th century and prior in the US, in the West, natural hair was quite rare. Straight hair was very much the norm, not only the norm, but sort of what was seen as beautiful, what was seen as professional. Of course, we had kind of varying moments, like maybe you're an artist, maybe you're an activist. There was folks who did have natural hair, but in terms of what was the norm, what was the standard, what was professional, of course, for most of the 20th century, that's going to be straight hair, wigs, and relaxed hair. And so I think, we're having this conversation about natural hair, race, is natural hair discrimination, race discrimination. I think as we see sort of progression throughout the 20th century, different kind of activist moments and moments of resistance. Of course, famously, the Black Power movement, mid to late 1960s. We also kind of early 20th century saw some pockets of it with like Garveyites and those moments as well. But as we see kind of moments of resistance and racial progression, we see it kind of opening up of what kind of hairstyles are acceptable. So now that we're in the 21st century, natural hair movement, Obama is president, we see kind of these really big strides in terms of acceptability of natural hair. But of course, as this bill speaks to, we still have these moments of tension and these moments of policing. And so there's been so much progress, but there's definitely work to be done. And this bill and conversations like these feel like a big part of that, I think.
That's right. And so just again, to socialize this a little bit more, when I was younger, there were only two people who had locks. Bob Marley, right? And Tracy Chapman.
Yeah.
And the vitriol that you would hear about Tracy Chapman and her hair and the comments about her from my own family, from my own beloved grandmother who has now since passed away.
Yeah.
When I locked my hair, she's like, but you're going to be ugly. That was her frame of reference.
Absolutely.
right? Or it's going to stink. You're not going to
Yes.
wash it. Like
Yes.
all of these sort of,
And what will other people say?
what will they
Or
say?
think.
How are you going to get a job?
Yeah.
You know, like this kind of mind frame. And so it leads me to the question, and I'm going to ask this of both of you to kind of share with the audience, do you think hair discrimination is the same as racial discrimination? Are they the same? Is there a cross section, an intersection, or are they different?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating question. I don't think that they are exactly the same as in they mean the same thing, but I think they're deeply, deeply interconnected. As what was the exact language you were talking about in the bill? A
Race-based trait.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
It is a,
Yes,
yes,
a
because it is a
race-based trait.
Mhm.
That feels right because, of course, having natural hair does not equate to Blackness, but it's so sort of deeply connected to Blackness. And I think part of what sort of the bill does and kind of these conversations help illuminate when we get into things like legislation or dress codes is something I've sort of written about and talked about before, right? We can look at kind of corporate dress codes or school dress codes, and they will list inappropriate hairstyles and they will list locks, afros, braids alongside blue hair, mohawks, right? So there's this kind of othering and exoticizing that happens that is so deeply racialized, right? The way that Black people's hair sort of naturally grows out of their head is equally as controversial, kind of purposefully agitating as like a mohawk or a pink hair. It's all about sort of history and race politics and, you know, white supremacy, racism. We should be unafraid to sort of say these words and these conversations. Yeah.
Yes.
No. Supervisor Mitchell.
I agree. The day before he signed the bill, the governor and I were doing press, and we were in a room off the side of the Senate floor waiting to be interviewed at Good Morning America. And his social media blew up, and just people were like, you know, how classic California. California has unhoused people and this and that. And he's talking about hairstyle. And he was eloquent. And at the bill signing ceremony, for me, it was a moment when I knew he saw me. When he said, in response to the social media drama, you know, this isn't about a hairstyle. This is about discrimination.
Yeah.
It is a form of discrimination. Because when you think about it, we were the only group of people who were told how to wear our hair. I got hundreds of letters from parents and the copies of the suspension notice based on the dress code violation, where the violation was your hair is a distraction to others. My hair is a distraction to you, so I'm being suspended because you distracted by my hair. The Dove support was phenomenal because that's what helped, you know, blow us up. There are all kinds of good policies that pass, but if you don't have a marketing team and a PR team to get you in Essence and get you in O Magazine, so that was another interesting experience for me. And so to be on panels and travel and to be on a panel with the young girl who was suspended, who was told at 13 her hair was a distraction to others. Now, you know, it is hard enough on a good day to be a girl at 13 and to be told that something about you, your natural state is inappropriate. To be told that your mother, who chose to put your hair in plaits or braid your hair 2-strand twists, that the school policy can trump your mother's decision about what to do to your hair. You know, that is a layered kind of message that we are all going to have to work overtime to unpack for those young people. It's discrimination.
That's right.
Plain and simple.
Plain and simple. Listening to the two of you thinking, like, would they have said that to someone who is of Asian descent, whose hair is naturally straight, typically naturally straight, what would happen? It wouldn't be tolerated. It wouldn't be tolerated. Or someone who has loose curl pattern, as an example. You can't have curly hair.
However, I have been contacted. There were some women in the media who covered this. Remember the Barbra Streisand movie? where she's ironing her hair. You remember that?
No.
And so I think that what was it? Like Stars
Is it
Born?
Natural?
Say it again. Was it a Stars
Oh,
Born?
Stars, the
And there's
original.
The
Okay.
original.
Chris Christopherson.
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's not a Stars Born because it's with
Oh.
Robert Redford. It's with Robert Redford. The Way We Were. Thank you.
Thank you.
And she has curly hair and she's getting ready for a date. And she literally has her hair on the ironing board and she's ironing her hair.
Yeah.
And right. And
Yeah.
so I have met white women, Jewish women
Yes.
who had heavy curly hair who said they were told, those who work in the press, like, oh, once you graduate school and you're going to try to get a job in the media, you might want to do something about that.
Well, and I think that there's a like somewhat of a demarcation because I qualified that hair as a tighter curl pattern. So when it's loose curl pattern, you know, the California
Rita Hayworth
lazy
curl.
look, yeah,
Right.
that's
That's
okay.
Well, you know, a part of the Dove survey, which, you know, broke my heart, that when you Googled beauty,
I've seen that study.
you've seen that.
Yeah.
It's blonde hair. When you Googled pretty hair. And then we all remember being offended by Bo Derek being credited with inventing
The
French braids.
yes,
Not
cornrows.
cornrows.
I don't
Right.
know. I don't even know if they called them cornrows at the time.
No, well,
okay.
yeah. Now,
Yes.
right.
This is such a rich conversation around hair. Let's talk a little bit about since the passage. And I don't want to minimize like this part of the conversation because I think this is really important. But since the passage of the Crown Act, have you seen the conversation around natural hair evolve? And I want to talk a little bit about government. And I want to say, I came to Los Angeles County a decade ago. And this is a county at the time of 110,000 employees and at least 100 to 150 leaders in the county. There wasn't one other woman who had natural locks when I came. And that was really concerning for me because I spent so much time on the East Coast where you see, at that time, again, a decade ago, you see locks everywhere. And then to come here, and then fortunately for me, Supervisor Mitchell came and then other women came. And now there's quite a few of us. But let's talk about that. Do you think it's more accepted now?
How long have you been locked?
I locked my hair in 2019, so
Right before the
I'm on my
pandemic.
6th year. Yeah.
How long have you been locked?
I've been locked for 36 years. I know it's hard to believe I'm only 38, but 30, this is my 36th year.
Okay.
Yeah. Even since I did it, I feel like there's more acceptance. Like 2019 doesn't seem like that long ago, but I feel like it
is for a lot.
more and more common. I do a lot of writing on the contemporary natural hair movement. Mid 2000s onwards, we get this kind of mostly internet based, like a critical mass of women stop chemically relaxing their hair and kind of learn from the internet in many ways to style and maintain their natural hair. And so I think for a lot of women like me who did that around 2009, 2010, I think like locks feels like a kind of progression that not that every single person who wore loose natural will lock,
That's
but
right.
I think it feels like a natural kind of progression. Like I know I'm not going to relax my hair again, but I want to try something new. And if you're me, you just get lazy is part of what it becomes. And locks is a lot kind of more low maintenance.
In some ways.
I was about to say.
I don't go for the retwist too often. I'm gonna be
I mean, the
honest.
retwist, the washing, the color. I mean, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
You know, I want to kind of speak to what you're saying about, you know, at some point it's kind of like the progression has happened. But let's enter Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell in one of the most powerful positions that one could legislate from. That's a moment for applause. So she came into her office here at the time of, and I have to do some pop culture here, Olivia Pope. So I call it the Olivia Pope effect, and we're not talking about that part of Olivia Pope.
I love all things Olivia Pope.
We're talking about her hair and the look and the presentation, the small, beautiful, feminine straight hair, that whole dynamic of what became sort of the archetype for Black women in politics.
Hmm.
Then we enter Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell, who is completely different than that and just as bold and just as strong as the character. So I preface my question with that. Has it changed? And what have you seen and how do you feel like your presence has created that change?
I'm flattered. I locked for my 40th birthday, and I'll be 61 in September, so 21 years. And I've been going to Gwen. I have done everything one can do to their hair. Braids in the 70s, 80s, Sabongale, Mecca Frazier braids, cut it off. My lobbyist picture in Sacramento was, low, but I've done everything, asymmetrical. I've done
Have the pictures.
I have done it all, and was going to Gwen 2-strand twist. I like
Yeah.
big hair,
Uh-huh.
and so 2-strand twist. You take it out, you have big hair curl. And I said I'm not gonna lock, and I was going to Gwen maybe 5 or 6 years. Over time, watching the locks come out of her chair, and the trend just made the decision and decided, as my mother would say, "Oh, you think you were GAW at 40?" And I thought I was. Little did I know. I was
A GAW for those who are not.
grown something woman.
I still didn't catch the other word.
Yes,
earlier either.
yes. So you have to, oh, Covatus?
Yeah.
I'll take that later.
Yes. I had to look it up.
Think, Nat King Cole. It's a process.
Oh.
Calm. I said Covatus. He didn't say Covatus. He said calm, is what he said. I said it wrong.
Pompadour.
I said it wrong. It makes it worse.
We know about the
Forgive me, I was on the freeway in my brain. He said calm.
Okay, we know about the.
And this guy was like 30-something. I'm like, how do you even know that word? Calm, like think now.
Yeah, we know that one. Yeah.
Process. And I was also CEO of Crystal Stairs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew it would be perceived as a political statement. Just when people look at you, I knew that.
Yep.
And I knew, because I thought I was a GAW at 40, but I had positional power. And I knew at the time that Crystal Stairs is about 400 plus employees. I knew that I would also be sending a signal to them that if the CEO could do this, it really is acceptable. So that was kind of my thought process. I decided to run for office in 2010. And my shoe closet, as in kitchen cabinet, my shoe closet of advisors, we did a national scan and didn't find another Black elected woman with locks. There was a sister from Baltimore in Congress who wore braids. And then, of course, the sister just passed from Texas, braids.
It's Houston. I can't think of her name right now.
It's gonna come to me in a minute. Sheila Jackson Lee.
Thank you. Yes.
But no one we could find. So we called Emily's list. Anybody with locks? Nope. Okay. So I decided that people would make the decision to vote for me based on what was inside my head, not how I chose to wear my hair. I then proactively had a conversation with my campaign consultants. Because, campaign consultants want to win. And they will tell you, you ask any elected official, mainly women, what someone has told you on the campaign trail. Don't wear those big hoop earrings. Holly, your big jewelry is a bit much. Can you wear some pantyhose? And all of that. And I made a decision, because remember I was a GAW. While I thought I would be good in public office, I wasn't willing to change who I was.
That's right.
And so I had to proactively talk to these nationally recognized campaign winning consultants. There were a couple things that were off limits, and my hair was one of them. I didn't want them to come to me say no, and then me be looking at them sideways the rest of the campaign.
Yes.
I wanted to be proactive and help them understand that it was non-negotiable. Period.
And that's exactly what I was getting at. That's right. And so now you hold this very powerful position And I see more women with natural hair across the country.
Yes.
I wonder, like, to how much have you informed that? How much has your presence given permission? I can tell you from my own vantage point, from my field, I was one of the first. And I know today that I'm not. And I go to conferences and I see us everywhere because now there's a choice. And I want to be really clear here. I don't think anyone on the panel is saying straight hair versus
No.
natural hair.
No, it's choice.
Never. It's
Right.
exactly
It's
that.
choice.
It's the choice. And something that I love so much is that women who do the, I wish there was a better way of saying it, the fake locks, but then they take them out, then they have another hairstyle, and they have the freedom to kind of posit themselves where they feel like positing themselves.
Right.
That is a unique position for Black women because there's so few opportunities to be your full self and to bring your full self. So I thank you for that, Supervisor.
Appreciate you.
Some critics say that this law wasn't necessary.
Yes, of course.
I believe that it is.
Agreed.
And I was sorely disappointed to hear that or to understand that it didn't pass nationally.
Me
Because
too.
while we do have a level of progressive thought and ideology here, we all know that there are parts of the country that it's not the same. And so let's talk about that. Do you think that the Crown Act is symbolic or unnecessary? I think I know the answer to this, but I would love you to put the academic spin on it.
First, of course, I don't think it's just symbolic. I think it is necessary. I think we've just scratched the surface in terms of different cases and experiences and spaces socially that require this law. But I also think that even if it were symbolic laws pass all the time. Like I can think of, not to cross politics, but some specific laws that we are having conversations about now, about trans people, about different populations, where this is not a real problem. You are crafting this law and putting this law to take a stand on something and to make a statement, and because you want this conversation to be taken seriously in the public sphere. So even if this was just symbolic, quote unquote, I think it's meaningful in terms of the conversation it started, in terms of us having serious conversations about these things. But certainly I don't think that it is just symbolic. I think it's very necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, the opposition in the U.S. Senate several years has been, one of those, it's a solution looking for a problem. The assertion is that the existing EEOC and protections on the books would cover it.
Right.
My argument about that is, every case we looked at, you remember the airline stewardesses and the bank tellers in the 70s trying to wear braids. Every case was lost. There was not a single case where the woman prevailed.
Yeah.
Because there was no body of law for the court to opine on.
That's right.
That's why we had to create it and acknowledge that the way our hair naturally grows is race-based. And we're good with that. And so that's when I understood that the reason, because courts, make their determination based on an interpretation of the law. So there was nothing in the law to provide the protection. That's the point of the Crown Act. The other point is, for me, I knew we'd hit on something the first summer, that first July, when I heard from my old HR director, Crystal Stayer, said, I'm in Vegas at the National HR Directors Conference, and there's a whole track on the Crown Act. At the National Bar Association that summer, a whole track on the Crown Act. Because the Crown Act is the backstop. We don't want to get there where you have to assert your right. We want it to be baked into the policies on the front end. So for the national HR directors to be talking about the Crown Act and informing HR directors, for the National Superintendents Association to be talking about it, that let me know, well, these dress codes at schools will be addressed. That's been the beauty. I think that it has begun to proactively create a conversation and create a culture shift that will prevent the need for the law Because when do you go to the law? When your rights have been violated. And I want the backstop to happen sooner.
Yeah, I like that.
And if I could just add, I think too, it's so meaningful as a kind of culmination of a thing, right? Like, I think there's been so much at the intersection of like race-based activism, feminist activism. This is decades of work. Even the natural hair movement kind of itself, this is stuff that organically, like, women, like, people have done lots of work to advance.
Yeah.
And so I think even for people to be able to see the culmination of that work and see the years of, like, I had this story and we started this natural hair club at my school, and like, all those different things kind of coming together in something that we're having this kind of national discourse about, I think is super meaningful.
And to know that it is a movement, not a moment. All you have to do is walk through a drugstore.
Yes.
And remember when Carol's daughter or Afro Sheen, Ultra Sheen, and Afro Sheen Cosmetics. Remember when that used to be this section of the shelf? And you walk now, it's row after row, section after section. And the beauty industry is one of the most significant gazillion-dollar industries in this country. So for that industry to understand that there was a market, to acknowledge that we spend more on our hair care than most groups of women, just walking down that aisle tickles me. I said, yeah, because if we weren't going to embrace and own our movement, they have figured it out from a monetary perspective. There it is.
There's some really great micro brands, however, that we can continue to support Black creatives and Black chemists and
that's true.
people who are creating products for our hair in its natural state.
Yes.
You could talk to me after if you want some recommendations.
Yeah.
Local as well.
Yes, very local.
Very local. And I wanna move to the questions because I want to make sure this becomes an interaction, which has already been, because this is the way a supervisor is. All of you are having a conversation with her. There was one woman, I believe she was part of the Friends group in the back, who brought up a really great parallel conversation. And I believe some of your scholarship is on this as well, about dress codes. And in her case, I don't want to steal her thunder, but she was talking about tattoos as an example. And like, where is the professionalism, and is there a line? Supervisor and I work in government, you're in academia, so I think you have a lot more, wider breadth than I think the two of us do. And we are anomalies, let me reassure you. Where is the line? Is there a line? Should there be a line? I'll posit that there and then open the floor.
I think there will always be a line. I think the point is, as culture influences our norms, the line will move. When I got to Crystal Stairs was founded by, two Black women, Karen Hill Scott, Alice Walker Duff, and I got to Crystal Stairs in 2000. They had a dress code, and sometimes it's generational. Love you, Karen and Alice, in case you're watching. If a woman wore open-toe shoes, she had to wear stockings. And I was like, Alice, I'm 6 feet tall. I'm not wearing stockings. And no visible piercings, I think. Yeah. There may have been a tattoo thing. And I realized it was generational. And I remember telling them both, if we leave this in our policy, there won't be anybody in LA County I can hire at Crystal Stairs. There just won't be anybody. And so I think that there always will be a line in terms of cultural values and mores and norms. I think it will move. Mm-hmm. Just like us with locks in our various professions and tattoos, which I have. But I think it'll move. When I got my second piercing, my father said, oh, you're going to be an old boy with a second hole in your head. The long hair, the Beatles, it was revolutionary, So I think through time, what's acceptable is adjusted based on cultural and the masses. We will make the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. These things are fluid. These things are
Yes.
socially constructed.
Yes.
These things are, to some extent, made up. There's nothing sort of natural or inherent about these kind of guidelines. And when we look at sort of notions of dress codes and professionalism, oftentimes we see them sort of emphasizing one, kind of modesty, which isn't really what we're talking about with hair so much, two, sort of hygiene, cleanliness, and three, kind of what I was talking about before, like things that are sort of meant to provoke, like distraction, attention seeking. So the mohawks, the bright colors, and so as we sort of break these things down in the context of natural hair, one, certainly most of us know by now, hygiene wise, this is not really a thing. I think like we're breaking down that stigma little by little, particularly with locks, this notion that natural hair is like unclean or unkempt or something like that. And even if we sort of accept this kind of unkempt framing, right? Like this scrutiny only happens, of course, with Black people, right? I remember in middle school, in high school, the white girls would it would be called like the messy bun. And that was the whole idea, was like you would just throw the bun up like and kind of like, and it's like it was a look, it was a whole thing. The idea was that it was like they would call it, oh, I'm just wearing my messy bun. So this idea of like every hair needs to be in its place and sort of the hyperfixation on that is so race-based. And so that level of scrutiny does not happen transracially generally. And the last part about the sort of, again, this idea of like hairstyles or things that provoke, when we're talking about natural hair, we're talking about the way that people's hair grows out of their head, right? Like for most Black people, if their hair is untouched, it will eventually lock. That's what freeform locks are. So this idea of like your hair as it kind of grows out of your head is provocative, is attention seeking, needs to be, you know, changed in some way, is definitely racialized. So I think when we break down kind of what these notions of professionalism are really rooted in, it's a broader history of anti-Blackness. For young people, it is very easy to sort of look at older generations and older people and say like, they think this about, like, they talk about my hair bad, or they try to like, they're just stuck in their old school sort of way of thinking about these things. But one, I'm just very big on ancestors and lineage, and I can only be because the people who came before me were who they are and did work too, so that I can sit in the seat and do what I do and have the hair that I have. But it's also for them, particularly depending on where they grew up, when they grew up. This stuff was a matter of safety. This stuff was a matter of survival. This stuff was a matter of like, I'm going to wear my hair to get the job because this is the one office in like this town that's hiring Black women for this job, right? Like it becomes, the stakes are so high, and the levels of, you know, just violence and structural racism that our ancestors went through. You know, it's no wonder that, you know, when I locked my hair, so my aunties were just like, really? You know, it comes from a place. And so I think it's always important to hold that as well.
I love that you brought that up. Thank you for surfacing that.
I agree.
And socializing that, because we do have to remember the point in which we entered this conversation. And we're all very new to this conversation, relatively speaking. Let's open the floor. Cheryl, we got a hand here.
And before we wrap up, please don't let me forget about how I've brought the Crown Act to my new role at the county level, because I'm very excited of kind of Crown Act 2.0 in my own life. So
let's hear
talk
it.
about that.
Hi, this has been a great presentation. My question, I guess, is tied to something that's actually occurring right now. And it has to do with hair, but not necessarily that on your top of your head, but around your face. For men in the military, African American men are now being told they have to be close shaven. Yeah, there was something that came out about that.
Fascinating.
I thought that was.
But the African American men get hair bumps.
Oh,
And so with that, I think that
Interesting.
there's an issue there that is a
Race-based
race-based
trait.
trait.
It's a very good point, because a part of when you if you go back and read, you know, some of our public comments and our fact sheets, is what we talked about is giving us the option of wearing protective styles. And what I tried to help Senator Conk understand was, we now know some of those practices we engaged in to chemically straighten our hair aren't the safest.
That's right.
And so we talked about safety and cost and all of those things. So it's a really good point. I was not aware of that. So interesting. To allow women to wear braids and locks. And so I got pictures from women at West Point and different places. Now they had to be pulled tight and in a bun and all, but you could still have your hair braided and locked. Interesting.
Okay, so
To follow up on that idea.
we got a question from online. Now, this is a little long.
Okay.
I'm going to try to read fast.
Okay.
The Department of Children's Services requires children's social workers, CSWs, to take a training titled The Intersection of Hair and Skincare and Self-Esteem for Black Foster Youth. There is a belief that this class should be taught by Black trainers only, especially given the history of attack on Black women's hair and given that Black trainers have lived experience. DCFS training managers seem to have the perspective that this class can be trained by anyone, irrespective of their ethnicity. What is your perspective?
See, that's a setup. See,
That is I might want to just add a comment. I think it is true and it is false. I think that there are plenty of white parents who are parents in transracial families who have had to learn to deal with hair. And when they don't, we crucify them. So the fact that there is this sort of subculture, subsection of possibly, I am making the assumption they mean white. I'm not sure if that's what they mean. White people who can teach cultural hair awareness from a standpoint of a foster parent, I think that is okay. However, I do think that there's a lot of value in having a mixed race community of scholars or teachers to share how to manage hair. But I think we're backing ourselves into an unnecessary conversation. I imagine this to be a very small group of people. And we also want to make sure that these kids are being taken care of. So whoever's doing it, that's who we're focused on, whether they be white or whether they be Black.
What I heard from the question was a little different, that I am very proud to be in a county that understands who the children are in our foster care system and develops training to meet their needs. And so what I interpreted was, what DCFS employee has the right to conduct the training? That's why I'm not getting in the middle of that. I am deeply proud of the work that I have done bringing Crown Act to the county, partnering with the director of DCFS to talk about training, to work with members of the bench, Black women judges who in their court orders in placement of children are saying, and I want to make sure you go get this training so you know how to deal with hair. And very proud in our probation department right now, we have training happening at several camps to make sure that Black young people and young men in the care of the county have the appropriate shampoos and conditioners that are unique to us as well while they are in our care. So that's the way in which I have sort of transitioned the state level Crown Act to my current work at the county level.
I agree with what you said, Skye. Or Doctor.
Thank you so much. I was telling the doctor that I feel a little lost because I just chopped my locks off of 7 years about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because it got a little hot.
Yeah.
How do you guys handle people wanting to always touch your hair?
I knew this was coming.
What is it about us that they think we're pets and that we want you to touch our hair? It's our crown. Because I know I don't walk around going, oh, can I touch your bob? Can I see your messy ponytail? We don't want to touch them. What is it about us where they just want to touch us?
I've not had the touching issue with my locks. I used to have it with braids. Yeah, because they have to touch whatever I have. I had it with my braids. I wore it in the 70s and 80s with the intricate beads. And I would see people from across the room coming to me just like they were. But I've not had it with my locks. I've had, curious questions, but I've just not had the, can I touch your hair? I've had, does that take a long time? Do you do that yourself? I've had that.
Or are they real?
I've not had, are they real?
Oh, I get that one a
Interesting.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Does that take a long? Do you do that? I'm like, oh no, this is not my ministry. I go to Gwen Staples. I go to Sania. Yeah, I go to the people who do this professionally. So
Yeah.
that's
I have had it. And again, I think it's just because I've had locks for so long and because I've lived all over the country, including the Midwest and the South for a short period of time. And it used to really bother me because, it is, as you say, it's like the petting, the like open access. Then about a decade or so ago, I started to see it differently. And this was a choice. And the choice is that my hair is beautiful and people are interested. And if I come from a perspective of inviting in rather than calling out, I mean, this is my ministry. How can I approach this differently? I still block. I mean, it doesn't happen as much anymore because I think there's, economies of scale, right? But in the beginning, early, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, it was a big problem. And I remember just having that sort of figuring out how to respond because a lot of times it happened professionally at work where you can't just say anything that you want to say. You have to have a sense of decorum and professionalism. So I learned like these sort of blocking techniques. And then I said very clearly, that makes me uncomfortable. Please don't touch my hair. I don't touch yours. Right. And when you say that 9 times out of 10, they're like,
oh my
I'm
God.
so, you're
Right.
right. I'm
Didn't
so
occur to me.
sorry. That's right. And so it just takes a minute. And again, for me, it's about inviting in for a conversation rather than calling out.
How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I never experienced it. I don't know if it's like growing up when I grew up or and where I grew up. I feel like most of it's just kind of like I don't know, liberal white people these days are like, I'm an ally. I would never, so I think that's
progress.
That's progress. Represents the progress.
That's progress.
Yeah.
That's progress.
But I love what you said about just like kind of setting up, polite but firm, just kind of boundary. Like, I don't like that, but that sounds right to me in terms of how I would approach it.
Yeah.
But
what I just learned from your statement and can relate to is choosing to make it a teachable moment. Because when I stood on the Senate floor that day and presented the bill, I realized that's something I've served with you all for 10 years. You may have had questions. Yeah. I don't know. So in my presentation of the bill, I'm going to walk you through what it means to lock. As my loctician said, there's nothing dreadful about locks. So I don't use the term dreadlock. Gwen taught me that. But to consider it a teachable moment, to choose to assume their inquiry is authentic curiosity. There are things about other cultures and other peoples that I too am ignorant about.
That's the mind frame, right? So if we're going to live in this sort of collaborative or co-environment, we have to have some grace. And our hair is sacred. Our bodies are sacred. Right. But if we are going to try to get to this place of a multiracial, multi-dimensional community, there has to be a space to make a mistake and to ask questions. And that does not mean that we all like always the teacher. That's not, I don't think what we're talking about, but there's that invitation for conversation that I think is really important.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yolanda Lyons, and I wanted to ask you regarding the Crown Act. And by the way, I had the touching situation too when I was in junior high school. So we had to do the hair karate block and decide how you were going to respond to that. But I was curious as to whether or not any other states that you're familiar with have adopted the Crown Act.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you asked that question. Here is the current list. According to the Crown Act Coalition that emanated from our initial bill, 25 states have legislated and enacted the Crown Act into law. 2 more are law by executive order. 21 states have either not passed the act or filed a bill for consideration. So Arizona and Kentucky were via executive order. And I've had the real privilege to consult many of my former colleagues, largely Black legislators in some of these other states that have carried it. Dr. Akilah Weber, who represents San Diego in the California Senate now, has done Crown Act 2.0. The Crown Act amended education code to get kids in school and fair employment and housing for adults in the workplace. And so literally the year he signed it, that day I flew with Dove. We went to the Essence Festival. Essence blew up the whole thing on the Crown Act because it was the first. And a mother came up to me in New Orleans. Her young sons playing Pop Warner were told they couldn't have locks. So I was like, that's another area. So Senator Weber's bill goes into youth activities that are not school-based. So if you're playing travel ball or whatever, you're now protected in California with her expansion on the Crown Act. So there are a couple of states that haven't passed it: Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, Wyoming, Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. Some of these states that may be under consideration.
You didn't say Michigan?
Yes, no.
Which is my home state.
No, Michigan's up top. Michigan's up top.
Oh, no.
And I know that they passed it.
Oh, okay.
And some of my former colleagues in Texas, they worked on it. Tennessee and Texas and Arkansas worked on it for a number of years. And they struggled. They had, in Texas, they had the governor who told them, don't send me the bill. They had leaders who wouldn't set the bill for committee. So they had, even though they introduced it, they had structural barriers where they couldn't get it set for committee, all kinds of things.
Good evening. My question is back to the point you asked about piercings and tattoos. The discrimination part of tattoos is very prevalent in our community. You cannot be a Laker girl, whatever, if you have that. Therefore, I have, in raising my daughters, I would tell them, until you really decide what you want to do, don't mess up your body. Now, that might have been a job opportunity that they may not be able to get. Now, we know I'm from the 150s, so I'm 72. So the thing is, I remember going to a job to try to get a job as a buyer for Georgia Pacific. The lady said, you got to bring your transcript from college to even apply. So I immediately left. I knew that if I had gone back, I would have been called uppity. So I didn't even bother that. But that was in Arkansas. Okay. So you understand. So the thing is, if your body is all tattooed up or whatever, it may affect your employment. That was my point.
Thank you for your question. You know, I think it's a great question. When I talk to my students and kind of some of the folks I mentee and stuff, my thinking around it is like, look, you have to know the rules and decide to break them. So you like figure out in your industry what the norms are. Figure out in what you want to do what the kind of expectations are. I work in academia. I'm a professor in a liberal arts field. Like, I have tattoos, I have piercings, I have locks. It's a certain level of, like, maybe some people look at it sideways, but a lot of people have a lot of different presentation. It's just kind of more left liberal, right? But, you know, figure out in your industry what the norms are, what the expectations are, but you still have the right to make choices. It's your body, it's your life. If this is how you want to present in the world, like, you should have the right, but you might lose an opportunity. And is that a choice that you want? Like, you've got the right to make the choice, but I think people should have agency, and people should be able, you have one life, you have one body. But I think you're right that not every industry is the same. Not some are much more traditional. And like figure out what professional looks like in that industry. Then you can break the rules if you want to. It's your choice. But the issue is a lot of students coming, their first gen, their different backgrounds, they don't know what professional norms are. So
They don't
then
have
it becomes
the tacit learning.
yeah.
Right?
Like you need to be taught the things so that you have the knowledge. But then if you want to break those rules, if I explain like, look, this is the way the game is set up, some industries will have this, you still should have the choice, I think. But it's the reality as well.
Which I think you're bringing up a really great point, which we have a program here at the library called Adult 101. And part of what you learn in that series for young people are all of these social workforce norms, things, things that you wouldn't expect because so many young people just don't have that lineage of knowledge. Opening a checking account, how to use which fork to use when you're sitting at the table with all the forks, learning how to speak to someone in a professional way, how to sign off. Those programs are important. So I felt like that was a really important time to just like, center the library. But I do want to make a comment about tattoos. I think it's a cultural and a generational thing. And I think Supervisor hit it on the head. I think that the bar is being pushed further and further. What I will say is that I have many tattoos that I regret.
I was going to hit that. I was going there.
From a young age.
Yes.
But you can get them removed.
You can.
So there are options that I don't think we had before. If and when there was a time that someone's like, yeah, that, the T stamp, I won't say it out loud on the back, it's not really the T anymore.
Right.
There are options.
Or his or her name. And I, wouldn't want to be associated with that person ever again. And I'm not, it's interesting. Yeah. This is all deeply personal for all of us. I'm a mother. He's 24.
Uh-oh.
But what strikes me in the conversation I have, when I see people who have the ear plate, and my question is, if you aren't of that tribe, and that doesn't have the tribal significance for you, what does that mean to you?
Are you talking about ear stretching?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. What does that mean to you? Same for me for tattoos. What does that symbolize? What is your why?
I have a story. I used to have a tattoo. It's now gone. I had it removed. That was Arabic calligraphy. It was beautiful. What I didn't know as a 20-year-old is that for people who are of that culture and that religion and that community, it is blasphemy to recreate what God has created. So I didn't know that at the time. Right. And so I think this is an important sort of lesson around cultural appropriation. I used to have plates in my ears, not that big, but reasonable size. Fortunately, they closed up, thank goodness. But I also didn't know what I didn't know. And so I think now we have this sort of cultural awareness that we didn't have before, where we can have that conversation about appropriation, because just as we don't want people appropriating Black culture, other cultures don't want it the opposite way. So therein lies that conversation and that discourse. And I think a place where libraries can sit very squarely in that learning.
Will you convene a future conversation on cultural appropriation?
We've already done it, so we'll do it. The culture thing, we're on it.
And I just need to be in the audience. I don't want to speak. I just want to be in a space to have that.
I'll tell the other three.
We have
one more question up here.
Okay. So I had a young lady right here, so we'll do her question, then we'll hop over to his. And then y'all please make sure you guys go to the activity room and get some snacks, because our friends at the library, they've been very gracious.
Thank you, friends of the library.
Mine is really just a comment. I appreciate the supervisor and the good doctor here for the study and the intention to create the language. Because I think for so many of us, we've had the experience, but now that we have the language, we have the race-based traits, we have the science and the education and the expertise that Dr. Rowe brings, we're able to talk about it in a way that is meaningful, and we can have those teachable moments if we want to. We can share our experience in a way that's really informed and sometimes can be emotional. It doesn't have to be. It is rooted in so much. My little experience that happened a couple of weeks ago, I was at the gym and I saw a member at the gym touch one of the workers' hairs. And I knew she probably couldn't say anything because she worked there. And I said, "Oh no, we're not doing that in 2025." And the woman was like, "What?" And I was like, "You're not touching this woman's hair as if she's an animal." And she was like, "What? I mean, I what?" And then I like checked myself. It is not my role to make you comfortable with doing something egregious, right? I can inform you and say, "You know what, you did too much." But I appreciate now having self-esteem, security, I don't know exactly what the word is, the agency to have the conversation. And I appreciate you guys for doing the work that gives us a platform, gives us a common language to talk about it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Anthony Lyons. What made me think of this was the gentleman talking about, telling his daughter may not get a job, right? My father had a conch, okay? He would have been 101 if he was alive. So my parents were cool with me. I had a big fro in the 70s,
Yes.
a shag in the 80s.
Yes. Look
I
out.
never got a Jerry curl.
Yes.
But I did twice. I locked twice down to here. And I got a notice to come interview for a job at LAPD. Now, as a young Black man growing up in LA, I got pulled over a lot. A lot. For no reason.
Right.
A cop is right here.
Right.
I'm driving. He looks over, decides he's going to put,
Right.
I went through all of that.
Right.
So when I got the notice to come interview for a job at LAPD, and I had locks down to here, I almost didn't go. I said, they are not going to hire some dude with locks, right? The fear that I may miss out on a job, right? And I said, forget that. I went. I'm not scared. I'm representing who I am, who I believe I am. I got there, a woman with locks, another woman with twists, and a man interviewed me. So here I would have, and I got hired. So the fear, whoever, I didn't know who was saying it, but the fear of, ooh, you might mess up something, if I would have bought into, the fear just because of my experiences as a young Black man in LA getting pulled over all the time for no reason, asking, well, whose car is this you're driving in? And, how much did you pay for it? And I like, it's a Toyota. I mean, it's not a fancy, why are you sweating me about driving a Toyota? Right? But I just wanted to address that fear aspect of it.
I when I presented the bill, I said to my colleagues, I said, none of you have ever considered voting no on a Mitchell bill or a Mitchell budget because of my hairstyle choice. It has no bearing on my capacity to do my job. Now, you may have voted no on a Mitchell bill, but it wasn't because, her hair is unprofessional. It was not. It was for other reasons. And so I think, and it goes back to where I started, my deep sadness in the survey results, hearing Black women's attitudes about our own hair. And so for me, these spaces, thank you, Skye, thank you, is to create spaces for us to delve deeper and unpack our own stuff. That my mother, who was very progressive, called my locks braids for about 6 or 7 years. Right. Oh, your braids look great. They're locks, thank you. And it wasn't until she was at the salon and there was another woman there with locks. So I guess she was able to ask the questions that she couldn't or wouldn't ask me. And we had dinner that evening. So I saw this woman, her locks, and they were beautiful. And she never called my locks braids again. So we have to unpack our own issues. We can just start with ourselves and our own community. Start with the elders, us giving them grace and understanding. I made the decision. I said, I'm not going to tell her, Mom, you know, these aren't braids. I just said, oh, my locks are great. Thank you.
Yep.
I had to find my way of managing my own feelings about it and not make, you know, not, that wasn't going to be a fight every time she said it. So these spaces, I think, are important for us to find our own language and our own space and our own opportunities about our own attitudes and how we project that on other people.
And like many of us with locks still have hangups about like, oh, it's been too long since I had a retwist. Or we like look at freeform locks and we're like, I have locks, but freeform is, or we look at wicks and we're like, I have locks, but wicks are different, right? Like, so, I mean, I think it's all a journey of just
It is.
kind of, yeah.
Me and this gray hair. This gray hair is a whole different kind of situation. You're right.
Beautiful.
You're right.
Beautiful.
It's different.
All right, y'all. This has been a great conversation. Thank you guys again for coming out. Ladies, I appreciate you. This is a lot of wisdom up here. Can we just give it up for the wisdom up here?